Okay, friends, welcome back to our 11th Bessel Health Talks. We're so thrilled you're here. We invite all of the Hemostemix community to visit us every Thursday at noon. Our physicians and patients, our friends in regulatory, friends that support us with our clinical studies, and our stem cell manufacturing partners, and lots of other colleagues from around the world get together every week, and we're very grateful for your time. If anybody's interested in a direct conversation or wants to get in touch afterwards with any of our team, please just type interested into the comments and we will definitely follow up. So I'm going to share my screen, and we just appreciate everybody's attention for the next couple of minutes. Today, we're going to be focusing on intractable angina. As you all know, whether you're an investor or a physician or part of the patient community or part of our patient advocacy friends, ACP-01, angiogenic cell precursors, have a broad application in an investigational way that addresses ischemia, where blood flow has been inhibited, and ACP can go to the area of need and improve blood flow, which fosters oxygen and nutrition and helps with healing at the site of need. They talk about angina, and you'll recall from anyone who's been here before, we have covered our data in cardiomyopathy, wound care, chronic limb-threatening ischemia. These are all interesting investigational opportunities where Hemostemix has phase 1 and phase 2 data that continues to suggest a potential for these stem cells to work in the cardiovascular space. Today, we're going to focus on angina. We're going to talk about disease burden, our product candidate, how to access care. There are several pathways. Keep in mind that ACP-01 is an investigational therapy under development, not approved by the FDA. But we do focus on the notion of hope for angiogenic cell precursors to restore blood flow safely from a patient's own cells derived from a simple blood draw, heal at the site of need, and extend quality of life and extend life itself. These are all the investigational areas that we seek to learn more about in our clinical studies. Our mission to transform vascular health everywhere. We focus now on our audiences, on healthcare professionals seeking advanced treatment for no-option patients. Our purpose to help investors interested in revolutionary regenerative medicine opportunities, our community leadership on helping patients and families searching for hope, and our economics, supporting payers with highly cost-effective solutions to reduce the cost of care is absolutely essential. We cover these disclosures. ACP-01 is an investigational therapy under development, not approved by the FDA. There are several interesting pathways to this investigational therapy, one being clinical studies that are supported by the IRB in the past and going forward, state laws potentially, like in Florida, as we talk about every week, compassionate use and right to try in certain circumstances and under certain regulatory regimes in the US, Canada, and around the world. Patients are required to be provided informed consent and provide their consent and be advised of the investigational nature of treatment. We especially think about the law in Florida that has very clear scripting on advising around informed consent. Patients may travel for treatment in the United States or can receive treatment abroad potentially and should always consult with their physician. None of this should be misconstrued as medical advice. Angina is something that is quite prevalent and represents one of the most significant cardiovascular conditions affecting millions worldwide. One of the interesting things about angina is it's a leading indicator. It's a signal from your body saying, I'm not getting enough oxygen to my heart. That causes pain, and it's suggestive of downstream cardiovascular problems. It is chest pain or discomfort caused by reduced blood flow, which is ischemia, to the heart muscle, often feeling like squeezing, pressure, or heaviness in the chest. Typically occurs during exertion or stress and is a common symptom of chronic coronary disease. So chest pressure triggered by exertion caused by reduced blood flow and reduced or limited oxygen supply. So it's a body's warning signal. And we're going to talk a lot about that in all of our unique kind of care. How do we be more predictive to understand the warning signals or any other predictive diagnostics or signals we can glean to help people get out in front of severe disease and worsening, so that we can deliver interventions and get people better as soon as we can. So what's causing angina is the imbalance between the heart's oxygen demand and supply, right? And that really is exactly what we focus on here at Hemostemix. Coronary artery disease is where plaque is narrowing the arteries, creating this imbalance with heart oxygen. Coronary vasospasm, temporary constriction of coronary arteries, can reduce blood flow even without significant plaque buildup. Then microvascular dysfunction, problems with small blood vessels in the heart, or non-obstructive coronary artery disease, CAD, can occur in many of the cases. The incidence is very significant, 11 million cases in the United States, about 1.6%. It's about 3.4% of the population in the United States among adults. And then worldwide, a similar 1% in adults aged 45 to 65, with higher rates in women in that age group. And I think that's a key point. We constantly, I would say continuously, consistently overlook disease burden in women, and that's got to be a priority going forward. Cardiovascular deaths occurred globally in 2022, with angina serving as a key warning sign for many. There has been a century of progress in treating angina pectoris, from basic symptom relief to precision medicine. 100 years of medical innovation goes like this, right? With early recognition, understanding chest pain from reduced coronary blood flow, treatments limited to sublingual nitroglycerin, basic electrocardiograms were introduced in 1924. Through the 1960s, pharmaceutical breakthroughs, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, things of that nature that makes me think back to my time when I got started at Merck Sharp and Dohme, that was a leader in cardiovascular care, where we were bringing forward antihypertensive medications and obviously Zocor and Mevacor and statins, things of that nature, to support the overall armamentarium for physicians, into surgical solutions in the 70s and 80s, bypass, grafts, rerouting blood around the blockages, into the minimally invasive revolution, right, with stents, ballooning procedures, and then now into precision medicine with autologous stem cell therapy, where there are, lots of options emerging that we think are complementary and additive to the armamentarium of physicians today. ACP-01, our product candidate, is very exciting. As you all know, that's why you're here, to learn about the investigational nature of ACP-01 as an autologous stem cell therapy. There are two big words we should unpack. One is angiogenic. That means restoring of blood flow. The second is autologous. That means from a patient's own blood. Those two qualities really differentiate and make ACP-01 unique and special, where our cells go to the site of injury, produce new blood vessel growth, reduce inflammation, enhance tissue repair, in a safe manner. And because it's your own blood, we'll talk a little bit more about the safety implications in a couple of slides. The conditions under investigation, really, as we talk about ischemia everywhere in the body, which we know is caused in part by the Western diet and lack of exercise and all the challenges we face in our modern world. But that manifests as angina, as cardiomyopathy, as congestive heart failure, as chronic limb-threatening ischemia, as vascular dementia. These are all downstream effects of cardiovascular disease or lack of blood flow caused by narrowing of the arteries, blockages of arteries, and things of that nature. We have 498 patients now treated, 318 in 7 trials, and there may be limited availability in the United States, state by state, and around the world, based on several legal pathways that we touch on sort of continuously as that evolves. And we've talked a lot about our clinical studies as a pathway to care. This is really a look at 7 of our trials and the discussion around safety. And so of these completed studies, because it is your own blood, the stem cells are from your own blood, there are no immunological rejections and things of that nature. There has been one death in a trial that was specific to an unrecognized silent myocardial infarction, and we're happy to answer any questions about that. Today we're going to be focusing on tresukosol, which is our study, open label, of 24 patients suffering from intractable angina, treated with intracoronary ACP in the region of ischemic myocardium. And so the safety discussion, there are a couple of components that are important. Because it's a simple blood draw, it's an office procedure, avoiding anesthesia, There are no complications associated with bone marrow harvest or no ethical concerns associated um, with other types of stem cell derived treatments. No parasites, no viruses, no pathogens, no risk of neoplasia, no ethical concerns with fetal tissue, no transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, and then no risk to medical providers. And this is a summary of our safety data. If we now turn to our key study for angina, N of 21, or 24 rather, excuse me, we're going to talk a little bit about three main markers that were discussed in the study. And I just want to cover the background of the study. This is a pilot clinical trial carried out to assess the safety and efficacy of intracoronary injection of Bessel, an autologous angiogenic cell precursor-based product for the treatment of patients with chronic stable angina. 24 patients were enrolled prospectively and treated with ACPs. The administration of the therapy is based on identifying ischemia, but viable myocardium and the distribution of occluded coronary arteries. ACPs were prepared from cells separated from non-mobilized peripheral blood of each patient, cultured ex vivo, and injected via catheter with proximal balloon occlusion of the coronary artery. The patients were assessed clinically pre-treatment and at 1, 3, and 6 months after treatment using these parameters. And we're going to dig into each of them, but this is interesting. The Canadian Cardiovascular Society scale, the 6-minute walk test that looks at exercise capacity, and then metabolic equivalence and perfusion defect. And I'm going to define each of these because the data is important. The readout at the high level, as it relates to the Canadian Cardiovascular Society score, decreased from 2.1 at 3 months, p-value of 0.001. The 6-minute walk test increased from 333 meters to 414 meters, essentially walking the length of a football field. And then the perfusion defect, which is the ability to restore blood flow to the heart, increased from 38% to 50. We'll cover that in a second. From 38% to 21% at 6 months. P-value 0.005. I do want to go into each one of these because it gets exactly to the mechanism of action, what we're studying, the diagnostics that we're using, and then how to really interpret the data so we can go forward in our discussion. So let's talk about perfusion defect. So what it means is a perfusion defect is an area of the heart muscle that isn't getting enough blood flow, often causing the chest pain or the angina. It's measured as a percentage of heart affected with a higher percentage, meaning more of the heart is not getting the blood supply. So in the case of the study, we're going from 38.4% defect to 23.8% at 3 months. That's about a 38%. That means that about 38% of the heart muscle was not getting enough blood, which is the cause of the pain, right? The 6.19% shows the variation among the patients. But after 3 months of treatment, this dropped to about 24%. So the perfusion defect dropped to 24%, meaning a smaller part of the heart was starved for blood. Okay, now by 6 months, the perfusion defect improved to about 21%, indicating that a little bit more of the heart was getting proper blood flow. And it means that because of the improvement at 3 and 6 months, because of the p-values, p of 0.004 and p-value of 0.005, that was highly unlikely due to chance, and that strongly suggests the treatment actually improved blood flow to the heart. So in layman's terms, before ACP-01 treatment, patients had serious problems. About 38% of their heart wasn't getting enough blood, causing moderate chest pain during activities like walking. After 3 months, the treatment improved blood flow, meaning only 24% of the heart was having issues receiving blood, which essentially eliminated the chest pain for most of the patients in the study. Remember, this is a phase 1 safety study of N of 24. By 6 months, blood flow improved even more down to 21%, and the chest pain stayed low. These changes are highly reliable, meaning treatment, more likely than not, made a difference in helping patients' hearts get more blood and feel less pain. And so that's an interpretation of the perfusion defect, which is interesting. The second piece is understanding the Canadian Cardiovascular Society score. And you can see an image of it here on the right. Grades 1, normal physical activity does not cause angina, such as walking and climbing stairs. Strenuous or rapid or prolonged exertion may. Grade 2 is slight limitations, walking or climbing stairs rapidly, walking uphill. Grade 3 is marked limitations of ordinary physical activity, walking or 1 or 2 blocks on the level and climbing on flight of stairs could cause pain. And grade 4 is inability to carry on the physical activity. The goal of using the CCS, knowing that it's measured from 1 to 4, where 1 means very mild and no symptoms, and 4 means severe pain. In our trial, in this phase 1 study, the mean CCS score decreased from 2.1 to 1.05 at 3 months. So before treatment, patients had an average CCS score of about 2.1, meaning they experienced moderate chest pain during regular activities like walking. After 3 months of treatment, the score dropped to 1.05. Which is close to 1, meaning that most patients had little to no chest pain or only felt it during very strenuous activity. At 6 months, the average score was slightly higher at 1.18, but still pretty close to 1, indicating the improvement in chest pain was maintained. And the variability plus or minus 0.13 remained low, showing fairly stable outcomes. The p-value, p001, means the improvement was highly statistically significant or very unlikely to be due to chance. So in other words, the treatment almost certainly caused the reduction in chest pain. In layman's terms, after getting ACP-01 treatment, patients went from having noticeable chest pain during everyday activities to almost no pain, or pain only during intense effort within 3 months, when that number held steady at 6 months. So the results were reliable based on this data. The third piece, which I think is important to cover, are understanding metabolic equivalence. Okay, so this is, how we determine how much better patients with severe angina could exercise after receiving a treatment, such as ACP-01. So the breakdown here is the exercise capacity measures how much physical activity someone can do before getting tired or experiencing chest pain. It's measured in METs. The metabolic equivalent, where 1 MET is the energy used while resting. Higher METs means a person can handle more intense activity like walking, climbing stairs, or running. So in the case of the study, going from 5.62 to 6.73 at months, before treatment, patients could handle activities requiring about 5.6 METs on average, which is roughly equivalent to a brisk walk or light jog. At 3 months of treatment, their average exercise capacity improved to 6.73 METs, meaning they could do slightly more demanding activities like climbing stairs or moderate cycling with less discomfort. The p-value, 0.004, means the improvement was statistically significant, again, or very unlikely to be due to chance. Treatment likely caused the increase in exercise ability in the context of this phase 1 study published in Circulation. So in layman terms, before treatment, patients with severe angina could only do moderate activities like brisk walking before feeling limited by chest pain or fatigue. After 3 months of ACP-01, they could handle more demanding tasks like climbing stairs. So I think this is interesting, for the obvious reasons that we continue to talk about. Restoring blood flow, improving oxygen and nutrients to the area of ischemia leads to, in this case, reduction of pain, improved exercise capacity in the context of the study. We do cover the mechanism of action every week. And again, it always fascinates me as I continue to think about my 25 years in healthcare, starting off in pharmaceuticals, taking statins and or offering statins and blood pressure medication, still important, through advanced biologics that we did a lot of work around injectables, and now to stem cells, where we have an interesting pluripotent capability using your own cells that have a particular functionality. So in our case, we abstract through a simple blood draw and isolate the angiogenic cell precursors using our proprietary technology. The cells are cultured to stimulate new blood vessel formation, improving circulation to the oxygen-starved tissue, there's an impact on inflammation reduction. Cells then can reduce harmful inflammation while creating optimal healing. Paracrine signaling, releasing growth factors and cytokines to activate the body's natural repair mechanism. And then targeted delivery, meaning the cells go to the area of need where the damage and where the ischemia is. I'd like to cover now the pharmacoeconomic model. This is an LLM analysis. We will be conducting further studies, but illustratively, I think it's instructive to talk about the economic burden now in the case of angina. It's imperative for us to contextualize the patient benefits to their health as soon as possible to prevent downstream disease that is expensive and has cost to quality of life and to life itself, and then system-wide benefits. And can we reduce readmissions? Can we impact with fewer complications? Can it be safe? Are there implications to longer-term care costs? We think there are, right? So breaking the cost cycle, going from sick care that is sort of continually now described by Kennedy and the head of FDA, and going towards cell therapy that has the potential to improve care, but it is expensive, and cell manufacturing is new, if you would consider 20 years of development new, but essentially scaling up the culturing of someone's personal cells takes a level of effort. And so we look at the initial investment, we look at the break-even points, and we look at that in the context of reduced utilization, fewer hospitalizations, fewer ER visits, fewer interventions, and the long-term sustained value of living better longer and improved quality of life. And these are all things that we look at in our trials, and we'll look at in the context of our pharmacoeconomic analyses, now and going forward. So in the case of angina, patients are incurring about $14,800 a year in combined medical and pharmacy costs. The national burden is about $100 billion, with projections showing a fairly significant rise to $1.4 trillion by 2050. And the hospitalization impact for cardiovascular events costs about $21,000 per stay on average. And so these escalating costs underscore the urgent need for innovative treatment approaches that can reduce immediate expenses out of pocket, but also reducing cost of the system. This initial view shows potential cost-saving potential, right? So we think that there's a line of sight to 30 to 50% in lifetime savings potential, 20 to 40% in cardiac expenditure cut. We do that by looking at the standard of care, measuring against the ACP-01 treatment, and then long-term savings, which we think in the case of angina is about 40 to 60,000 net savings per patient over 5 years. Webinars in the case of vascular dementia, and having long-term care, it's $400,000 to $500,000. In the case of wound care and amputation, it's $300,000 to $400,000 all in. And so these are they're very expensive implications, and we're focused on demonstrating that value every day, in our studies and how we function as a business, right, to bring stem cells forward to the healthcare community. Our workflow is designed to be easy to operate, to be simple for our clinicians who are potentially referring patients to our clinical studies that are and will be IRB approved. And in the case of any legal pathway, like in the case of Florida or around the world at our stem cell clinics in various countries, it's essentially the same, which is a patient is referred by their physician, to a Hemostemix clinic, or to another resource or a facility where Hemostemix, the ACP-01, can be offered. We establish qualification with our trained professionals, our trained clinicians, to say, a patient is or is not qualified to receive ACP-01 based on their diagnoses, their history of diagnostics. Either we can review the ones that a patient currently has, or conduct further analysis that the physician will determine if the patient is eligible. Then our care navigators will work with the patient to talk about travel, how and where to get care, the time it takes, the cost of care, how to access any of the services that we're focusing on that helps patients afford care, whether they are low monthly payments, out-of-pocket payments, or other nonprofit opportunities, like our 501(c)(3) that we've been building. And then patient notification, if qualified patients then, proceed then to have their blood draw 7 days later, they'll receive the injection of ACP-01, their own stem cells. I just talked a little bit about access to reserve essentially your seat in line. Because of the manufacturing process of stem cells, we do flight patients literally one at a time and calendar it, schedule it. Patient's informed, the clinicians are informed, so it's well organized. We do have several banking partners to offer low monthly payments. Right now it's about $800 a month. And then support for those most in need, our 501(c)(3) foundation, we particularly like. And for all of our affluent patients and investors who are able to afford a treatment for themselves, if they would consider offering one to someone in need, we would greatly appreciate it. And that's a big part of our mission to improve access for all of our patients. This is my last slide. For physicians and patients on the line, if you'd like to discuss clinical trial enrollments, our wait lists, essentially our registry, ask about compassionate use or payment options, please reach out to me. If you are on the medical affairs side or a clinician or want to do a deep dive on the science, our chief medical officer, Dr. Fraser Henderson, is amazing. I would encourage you to reach out. He's incredible. I'd love for you to get to know him and hear from him and better understand our science and our studies that are underway. And then for investors or for any reason at all, our fearless CEO, Thomas Smink, is an amazing man. He's incredible, and he can answer all of your questions. Thank you for so many who are attending today. I think we get more and more folks out every week who are excited about ACP-01. Let me turn over to our Q&A. So here's a good one coming in. How soon do you expect current trial loading to be fully completed and ready for patient treatment? So this is a great question. So for example, we often cover our clinical pipeline. There are several in the queue. One of them I'm particularly excited about will be in the area of vascular dementia. I would expect that trial to go through IRB approval, certainly in fourth quarter, and then we'll be recruiting immediately upon that approval, and then that'll be fielded and completed throughout 2026. That's particularly near and dear to me, having spent the last couple of years working in the Alzheimer's space and actually working on several Alzheimer's drugs before that, earlier in my career. But there's so much unmet need and so much pain and frustration in the Alzheimer's space needing true answers. And so we have treated one patient, who for years has had an N of 1. This is not clinically or statistically significant. Our first human appeared to have sustained cognition in that instance. And that's just, a particular patient story that we talk about from time to time. But it's suggestive and gave us confidence that a phase 1 study in vascular dementia would be relevant and important and very meaningful for the Alzheimer's community that is pretty desperate for actual and real solutions. There are other trials coming down the line, a basket study that will have several cardiovascular indications there. And that is also a fast follower among other trials that we're teeing up. Fraser has talked about, Dr. Henderson's talked about several of them that really expresses the breadth and depth of our clinical platform, and we can cover that more in depth in the next webinar. Okay, here's a good one. How does ACP-01 compare to standard angina treatments? And so I talked a little bit about this earlier, and about the history of care in angina, from the early days of nitroglycerin to electrocardiograms to the importance of stents and rerouting blood vessels around the blockages, all the way to really now that is a revolution around stem therapy, right? That is about going to the root cause of the disease. And so essentially, if you're a no option patient and you've exhausted all standard therapy and you've really maximized, all the care you can get, as sort of described, so far in this webinar, then, you would consider, a treatment of ACP-01. But, we certainly, tend to position ourselves as really, the end of second line therapy or last line therapy in most guidelines, especially in the case of compassionate care for patients that have exhausted all other treatments. They still are suffering or have extreme pain, that is really inhibiting their quality of life, et cetera. Here's another good one coming in. During the study with angina patients, were there any other changes in medication or diet? So I don't have that information, but I'd be happy to follow up. We can certainly dig into the details of that study, and exactly what the control was. And I'll get back to you on that topic, or I can cover that off at the beginning of our next webinar, number 12, next week. But we'll be sure to get back to you. That's a great question. And secondly, the patient's been followed for longer than 6 months. In other words, how durable is the neovascularization? That's a great question. In the case of angina, what I believe I'm seeing in our study data is being followed up to 6 months in the study tresukosol. But in our other indications with chronic limb-threatening ischemia, follow-up at 4.5 years showed a reduction in limb amputation and a reduction in mortality. You'll recall that study from last time. That was another phase 1 and then also a phase 2 study. So it's a great question on the durability. We've had discussion on, will a patient need a second ACP-01 therapy? Dr. Henderson has some important hypotheses around that, and certainly that will be considered for all future studies going forward. And certainly, our patients are very often comorbid with numerous areas of ischemia. And so, we will, we're constantly thinking about what is the right application of the standard of care, medications, diets, anything else you would expect to live better longer. And then finally, in the context of no option, then we discuss the role of ACP-01. Durability is a question. Thank you for putting a light on that, and that's something that we'll come back and discuss. Thank you for that. Okay, another one coming in. What's next for ACP-01 and angina? So I mentioned earlier, we have a robust clinical platform. One of them is a basket protocol that is being prepared for IRB review. We do have discussions with FDA coming up in the next 30 to 60 days, but certainly angina is a key part of that for lots of reasons. It really gets to the core of cardiovascular disease and cardiomyopathy. It really is just simply part of vascular disease that affects the heart. It's a leading indicator that something is wrong. And so we want everyone to pay attention to angina and chest pain. And then certainly it's something that it's certainly an indication we believe we can potentially impact, and certainly will be in future studies going forward. Follow-up question on our pipeline relative to NCP-01. And this is, I think, a huge part of our future. NCP-01 is really a sister cell, a neural cell precursor that helps regrow neurons. Dr. Henderson's talked about the importance of that. In fact, I just got a text this morning putting some urgency around NCP-01. We're excited about it. We've talked about an orphan indication for syringomyelia and other applications in dementia and neuropathic pain. So we're gonna see a lot more of NCP-01 going forward. A question about our patent protection. Thank you for that. We've talked a lot about previously the 90 plus issued patents for ACP and NCP, exclusivity running through 2035. We think that gives us a bit of moat and a foundation for our intellectual property for a long runway to come. And so we're excited about that. And then here's another one coming up around sort of competitive positioning relative to other stem cells. And I would say this gets to me back to the safety question. The allogeneic cells that are harvested from other donors versus our cells, our autologous cells coming from the actual patient. There are implications if it's your own stem cells. There's no immunological rejection. There's no risk of any other contamination. And so I really think to me it's more in the realm of safety at this point. But that's a strong part of our belief that ACP-01 has a right to be included going forward in clinical studies and potentially the arm of physicians focused on treating vascular disease. What has gotten me very excited about the last, couple of months of doing these webinars has been to really do the deep dives in each of these areas of science. Each one is distinct, but has very similar characteristics. And it really gets to the heart of the potential of ACP-01 to improve blood flow in a safe way, from your own stem cells, with implications for impacting different diseases in ischemia, whether it's in cardiology and dermatology and wound and neurology relative to dementia. But these are all significant communities with, a lot of very busy people focused on innovation. And we're excited to bring forward our conversations in the right way. And so we're going to be attending several scientific meetings coming up in the next couple of months. So we will be, I'll be reading out that list to you probably next week. But for anybody going to conferences around wound care and chronic limb-threatening ischemia and cardiology and neurology, we're excited to be showing our data, in the form of poster presentations, so that the scientific community can see how we fit in to all the contributions to literature. So please look for us there. Look for us at the major events. Look for us here every week on our weekly Bessel Talks webinar. Please contact us directly. We'd love to hear from you. I do see another question coming in. Thank you. Do you have a targeted date in December when treatments will begin? Yes, treatments will be available in December. As we've talked, our manufacturing facility in the United States, based in Puerto Rico, it will be available. So we are filling slots now. We encourage everyone, please, if a patient is registered, you can talk with a care navigator to talk about safe and legal options to learn more about how to access Bessel as it relates to the state of Florida, as it relates to our clinical studies, as it relates to things around where you can go around the world, where our providers will be available and coming online per regulatory approvals. So we can have those conversations, and this is constantly in motion, and we're working very hard to bring this to life, and we're excited to fill out our roster. So we'd like to fill patient seat number 25 and keep going from there as it relates to our studies and our availability in the state of Florida. Okay, friends, thank you so much for being part of the Hemostemix community. We're grateful for all of you. We couldn't do it without you. Please come back next Thursday, and we encourage you to come back every week as we're constantly learning more about the potential of ACP-01, our clinical studies, and how we can impact care in unique and innovative ways. So thank you again for all that you do for us, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.